All right, so last week, Pastor Jason told us about putting up guardrails, those guardrails that keep us from going over the edge of to something that of the unknown. One thing about guardrails that Pastor Jason said was that what may look tempting over the edge can lead into a much, I would say, a darker place for you to go into. This morning, we're going to be looking at what happens when the wrong people are chosen for those wrong moments by putting our faith into something other than the one true King. So we're going to look at Daniel chapter 2, verses 1 through 16. And I'm going to kind of stop here and there because I have some other notes I've written down too. So it begins that in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirits was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, and the sorcerers, and I had the word right, the Chaldeans, which in other words, depending on your translation, is astrologers, were summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know them. This is the king's request. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, which is the language of that time. And Daniel was written in Aramaic, not Hebrew. And they said, O king, live forever. So these men are praising the king, not the king above, but the king here, their earthly king, basically. Tell your servants of the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the word for me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretations, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and its interpretation. They answered a second time and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show its interpretation. The king answered, I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see the word from me is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you. You've agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the times change. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I should know that you can show me its interpretations. The Chaldeans answered the king, there is not one man on earth who can meet the king's demands. No great powerful king has asked so much as a thing of any magicians or enchanters or Chaldean. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. Because of this, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded that the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, why is this decree of the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in request to the king to appoint a time that he may show the interpretation to the king. So for each of us in this room, we sleep in various different ways, whether it's on our back, our stomach, our sides. For me, my wife will tell you that I will sleep at the foot of the bed. Literally, I would turn my head around if I can't sleep to get the proper sleeping that I need. I feel for her because she has to smell my feet at night. if it's a toddler, they roll around through the crib. Our daughter, she will sleep where we put her head at, and then somehow she'll go to the other side. Then she'll sleep where the bars meet and the headboard meet. I don't know what about 2-year-olds, but they sleep weirder than humans. Well, I'm a human. They sleep weirder than adults do. A normal activity that happens when we sleep are dreams, and we all have different dreams. Some can be good dreams, some can be bad dreams. The worst dream I had as a kid, if you remember the movie Twister. Twister came out when I was probably in middle school, which probably was a bad time for me to see that movie. But between elementary school and probably high school, I was afraid of tornadoes, but I was still very fascinated by tornadoes. So much that the tornadoes would suck me up, and then I'd just wake up and be like, okay, I'm still alive. It was until I faced my fear of the tornado, I lived. I don't know, but I don't have those dreams anymore. Now that I said that, I'm probably going to have a dream tonight about a tornado sucking me up. One of the most memorable dreams that I had, and it may sound cliche, but it's what I'm doing right now, is preaching. Never thought I would do it, but a dream happens, and you don't ever think it will ever happen. The way a dream is interpreted is depending on the person and who's having that dream. And as believers, there are good ways to interpret dreams, and there are also bad ways. So today we're going to look at one king's dream and how he was able to get it interpreted or potentially interpreted. Verse 1 opens up with the second reign of King Nebuchadnezzar, where the scripture tells us his spirit is troubled. Anytime we have a troubled spirit, for me, that's when God is trying to tell us something important. And if we don't listen to it, the outcome I've experienced is that it's never good. When the king's spirit is troubled, the king was asleep, but there was something for preventing him from falling asleep. Nebuchadnezzar was deeply disturbed by his dream. It says that his mind was troubled, and I don't know about you, but sometimes when we sleep at night, you wake up with that bad dream. Something is troubling you for some reason, and if your spouse is not awake, you're going to probably be up for a couple of hours trying to figure out why do I have this type of dream. It also said, some translations said that his spirit was struck, so something is stirred up. But because he was so disturbed, the king just could not sleep. But it says his sleep was done. So if your sleep is done at 3 o'clock in the morning, most likely you're going to be up till time for you to go back to work. For me, I fall asleep back at 6, and next thing you know, it's 7 o'clock, and I should be halfway to work by now, but I'm already late. For his sleep to be suddenly finished, there's a reason, and the king wants answers. And what I have in my notes is that God is trying to probably tell Nebuchadnezzar something important. But again, he does recognize that this dream is important. And ancient Babylonians believed that dreams were a message from the gods, which is a lower G, not the capital G. So I just want to make that point there. And thus, the right understanding of the dream was critical for such future. So in this case, Nebuchadnezzar apparently feared that there was a strange revelation that was contained. So there was an ominous message. So could the kingdom that he has be in trouble? So when sleep was disturbed again, there's I told you there's that abrupt awakening. A lot of people call it the sleep paralyzing. I don't know if anyone knows what the sleep paralysis is. If you do, raise your hand if you know what sleep paralysis is. Good, so I'm not the only crazy one who actually gets that. Because sometimes I wonder how my wife does not feel me not shaking and I'm just stuck in the middle of our bed. Okay, so good. All right, so she just keeps snoring. All right. So some of the worst sleeps that I get, again, is sleep paralysis. This is the falling asleep where you're just stuck to move. There are accounts where people said they felt like a spirit holding them down, like you're just stiff as a board. But we found similar accounts in the Bibles of dreams and interpretations. If you remember back in Genesis chapter 41, and this is verses 1 through 45, and this is where Pharaoh and Joseph are meeting, where Pharaoh has a dream and he cannot figure out the dream, but eventually Joseph tells them, 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty for Egypt. But we all know that Joseph had a better outcome of his interpretation that we're going to find later on. So when we face these similar situations, the Lord provides us two great solutions. One is a fellow believing brother or sister that you can go to, and they can help you with the dream, kind of give you a guidance of the dream. And then there's going to be then there's, of course, the Lord himself, who we should rely on daily. Guidance from a trusted source can prevent us from being hurt or hurting others, as I mentioned earlier, by having a trusted source. And then Proverbs 4:7 says that the beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight. When we seek more of an opinion from of an outcome of the help is different and more costly. In other words, if we seek somewhere outside of the world, if we seek worldly help, that worldly help may not give you that best solution. We see that the king calls for what I call so-called wise men, because these wise men are trained under the king. They know everything like the Sadducees and Pharisees. So the Nebuchadnezzar summons these men who have been seen in their own minds by many people who've probably been swindled to get their interpretations. And depending on our translation of the Bibles that we have, they are soothsayers. So these men are those that tickle the ears. Then we have the magicians who have nothing but smoke and mirrors. And then we have the sorcerers and the Chaldeans were summoned to the king. So these group of people should be able to see the future because they're in front of the king. They should be able to do what the king, actually they should have known. They should have been called a long time ago. They should have been there at the door. It's like, here I am, what do you need, king? But the king summons them. The people of this time, when they needed help, they would turn to these people to advise them of their issue. And whatever the king was dreaming made him uneasy enough where he has to call the outside world. The king does not go into any detail other than saying that he had a dream. Just like me saying, I want McDonald's. What do you want? I want McDonald's. I want to go on vacation. Where do you want to go? I want to go on vacation. That's basically how the king was treating these men. The men were glad to be in the presence of the king by using the words, "Oh, king, live forever." So they were already at his feet saying, "Yes, king, we're here. How can we help?" The men that the king are using are similar to what we call palm readers, tarot card readers, psychics. Is what I kind of figured out what these men are. But most notable, again, I think there would be more psychics. And if you remember those late night infomercials, call me now. I miss blankety blank because I don't want to get sued by YouTube and all their people. But these are the ones that you would say, I'm having this issue. Can you help me out? Yeah, for $1.99, I can give you what you want. Or what, babe? It is cheap. So in 2022, give me $10.99. I can tell you what you want and what you want to hear. But if you remember back for us 90 babies, Montel and Ricky Lake, they had the mind readers, what they call the mediums, that will talk to the dead. And if someone's talking to the dead around me, I may be black, but I can turn red and white in a heartbeat, and I'm going out the door. I'm just going to tell you now, I've turned red before, I'm gone. But these people prey on the weak in order to have what they want to be heard. As believers, we have to be careful with those people. And here's why: because they're not biblically sound people. We have to have biblically sound people in our lives to help us. Whether it's a discipleship with one person, or like the men and the women group have their groups, a small group, whatever it is, we have to have biblically sound people around us. With a number of what we have false prophets in this world that tell you here's a prayer towel. Let me cast the demons out. We have to be careful for what we see and what we put into our bodies, because those very same groups are the groups that don't really help us at all. In 2 Timothy 4:3, Paul writes to a young pastor where he says, "For the time is coming where people will not endure sound teaching, but have the itching of ears. They will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions. And they will turn from listening to the truth and wander into myths." With a lot of the prosperity gospels and the false prophets that are out, it's easy for us to listen to them and hear what they want to tell us to make us feel better. And it's very easy for us to say, I like what this pastor's saying because X, Y, Z. But there's a biblically sound pastor that they're not paying attention to. We can see churches grow under false doctrine. We can have small churches stay where they are with biblically sound doctrine. And that's the world that we live in right now. So my next point here is what you're going to find pretty funny, because in my head, I have a head of a 2-year-old because I have a 2-year-old. I call these men Humpty Dumpty. So we read that of the king's request that he only asked for one group, and that was the Chaldeans. And they asked for the king to tell them the dream on 2 occasions for a proper interpretations, because they had the hope that they could come up with something that sounded good. The interpreters were only confident if the king would tell them, "You tell me, I'll give you what you want." Those of this practice, again, I told you, pray on the weak, because you would give them the knowledge ahead of time. My dog died. "Oh, so your dog died. I just told you my dog died, so you know why I'm already here." Our dog did not die. We have 4 dogs. They're all living. I just said my fish died because we don't own fishes. But, anywho. The entire point of the interpreters were to tell the king of the dream, and if the king told the dream, there wouldn't be a point for them to be there. So in other words, the king was like, "Hey, I have this dream, but I want you to interpret it for me, but without me giving you information." That goes back into the whole, I don't want McDonald's, guys, but still, I want McDonald's to get me what I want, and I'll tell you if I'm happy or not. So again, I told you we had the Humpty Dumpty nursery rhyme. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's men and all the king's horsemen, donkeys, couldn't put the king back together again. I had that written down, and I still messed it up. The origins of Humpty Dumpty, one of the origins of Humpty Dumpty is that we could all assume Humpty Dumpty is the king. The wall was his reign, and the fight to preserve power, and the fall of his defeat. Because we have all the king's men, all the king's horses couldn't prevail to do what they had to do. So Humpty Dumpty here will be King Nebuchadnezzar. The wall will be the dream. And the king horsemen are the soothsayers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. The horsemen and the Chaldeans couldn't figure out the dream. The inability to tell the dream meant there was consequences, as what the king has told him. He already told him, "My word is firm. I'm not going to tell you again. Here's what's going to happen if you were not to listen." So the seriousness that comes from this king commands for the men to tell him of the dream. I'm one of those people who loves, I'm going to talk about food again, Chinese food. But you know how you get a fortune cookie and it tells you what the fortune is on the inside? I can tell you right now in my wallet, there's 2 fortunes. I'm like, ooh, I really like these fortunes. But one thing about those fortunes, they don't mean anything to me because my security is in the Lord. Again, I like the fortune cookie. It says, "Oh, well, this fortune is for you." Like, yes. In the end, it's just still in my back pocket because I'm not going to do anything with it. So we see how the king's stubbornness is unwilling to speak about his dream. The men continue to ask Nebuchadnezzar to speak about the dream, but they were brought in to be the interpreters of the dream without any prompts. Again, that goes back to those psychics that we tell you about, those mind readers. Basically, I'm just repeating myself. But the seriousness of the matter comes from the king's mouth in verse 5, where he wants the answers, but without giving the information. Pharaoh gave Joseph the answers. So what I have here is that they asked a question to give an answer for something that they should have known, resulting in threats of violence. The wise men and their families were basically put in harm's way. What we see is that if the wise men could tell the king their dream, then he would have been able to give them a more accurate information. So if the king would be like, I saw this, here's the interpretation. The men asked for knowledge of the dream, but the king's mouth is sealed. An impossible demand that these men are known for their wisdom through the land. But it's in front of the king, the spotlight is on them. Like any king, if their demands are not met, there is fury that comes with that. When evil is upon one's heart, James 1:19-20 says, know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Church family, when hardships come, the dreams that we once had may not come through for whatever reasons. But the words from another is what we may need to hear at that time. What James is trying to tell his fellow believers that we should listen to the thoughts of the Lord first. We should be listening to others who have the same mindset as us. We should be slow to speak. Do not be so quick to give out the information. Here's my opinion. Slow to anger. What God says is higher than what we think and what others think. When a fellow believer notices something is off with us, they should be ready to come to you and say, here is the issue that I see. Let me help. We shouldn't be so quick to say, leave me be. Then there's the incapable task that they could, these wise men. That is at this point that these men knew that they had no choice. The king saw right through them that they could not do what they wanted. This request could not be fulfilled. Their magic books of tricks could not work here. The works of man failed the king. It was placed on the gods that they trusted. The astrologers confessed that only the gods possess the information sought by the king, and the gods don't live among them. These are the fairy gods, as I want to call them. Could these men talk to God? Nebuchadnezzar probably thought they could. That's why he called them. Isaiah 44:24-25 says, what they said, only partly true. Earthly men could not provide what he wanted. Apparently I did not write that verse down. Don't know how I missed that. In other words, I thought I wrote that down. But basically, what they said was only partly true. Earthly men could not provide what they wanted. However, the one in heaven can do anything and everything, church. These so-called wise men only rely on their deity, who does not do anything for them. So when we do things outside of the way of our witness, our credibility is lost. Whether it's lying to keep, $1 million of mistakes from being seen. If it's, running a red light. If you're in Millington, the traffic cameras, those are beautiful. Or for teenagers, if it's trying to get out to do something that they want to do themselves. As believers, we're always under that microscope because we're supposed to be above approach. where we're supposed to be perfect, but when we do something out of line, that's when everybody likes to come down on us. Proverbs 22:1 says that a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches and favor is better than silver or gold. For the fathers in the room, the old saying is that your word is your bond. A handshake is agreement. If you don't know this, we're having a baby Jackson, and that's something I kind of think to myself that to grow him up saying, son, your word is your bond. What you say, carry it out. Rightly, not wrongly. Matthew 33 through 37 says, again, you have heard that it was with those of old, you should not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is the footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the King. And this is what I like about 36 and 37. And do not take oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. 37 says, let what you say simply be yes or no. Anything more from this comes from evil. If it cannot be done, do not go back on your word, or give the impression that it can be done. Sure. Matthew 5, 33 through 37. You're welcome. Nebuchadnezzar was a man of his word. The Chaldeans were not able to do what they have hoped they can do because they gave the procession. This is not a funeral. They gave the idea that they can do anything possible. I promise you I have a college education. The frustration of the king brought a sense of not only death to all wise men, but also to Daniel, who probably wasn't even in the room at all, or his friends. The sentence, again, included death for everybody, for Daniel and his friends, and since they had been trained by the kingdom, wise men, whether or not they were there, they had their duties. So this is what I like about Daniel. Daniel is a young guy. We know that he's probably in his teenage years. This guy is probably wiser than everybody else. I bet Daniel was probably wondering, like, what is going on? You're just being sent to kill me, and I have not done anything for this. So Daniel went into a caution for the reason that he wanted to live. Daniel probably said, hey, we are not in front of the king, but if he does change the outcome, but what happens if he changes the outcome of this crisis? There is time on his side, because Daniel asks for time. Even though the Chaldeans trying to buy time, Daniel doesn't know what's going on in the forefront, but Daniel wants time to seek the Lord's will, to figure out what's going on here. I probably wonder, and I wrote these notes down, I probably wonder if Daniel thought this: Lord, I know who you are. The king's request is mighty, but you are mighty. Guide me that I may show your might in who you are. That is probably what I was thinking. I was thinking, like, this man wants to kill me. I want to live. Lord, show me what to do. That's probably the countries you're going to ever hear me for a little while. But still, I was just wondering, like, what was Daniel thinking in that time frame that the king wants to kill him and all the other wise men, because he was sent for a reason. So I would say this: we learned about safeguards, but then last Sunday. But remember, there is wisdom in unseen places. There are moments of anxiety which the king has, and I can tell you that I've been there. A lot of us has been there. We should cry out to the Father, seek the Lord in prayer for this. Seek your church, and if you don't have one today, we would love to love on you for that. Let's be there to pick them up and let's be there to guide them a biblical way. Psalms 34:17 says that the righteous cry for help, and the Lord hears and delivers them out of their troubles. Matthew 6:25 says, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? We also see that the so-called wise men failed with it, where the so-called wise men were to come. The wisdom that comes from the Lord does not come from the world. The wisdom of the Lord comes from Him and the Word of God that we have in front of us today. Do not be enticed by the smooth sayers, because the world could lead us elsewhere that we should not go. And so many today are deceived by wolves that are actually in those sheep clothing. And those that deceive will face the Lord at that appointed time. We should be sober-minded, be watchful, because our adversary of the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking to devour. Wisdom from the world is not equal to wisdom of the Lord. The king wanted answers, but he did not get what he received. He got time bought. He ended up getting smooth say. He really got nothing at all. Basically, there was a game of cat and mouse. The idea is that we should already know that. The idea they should have already known what they were there for and not have a bag of tricks. Because normally, if I went to, let's say, Megan was a sorcerer. You're not a sorcerer. Megan probably would have went to somebody else, and they would have had a bag of dreams or something recorded where they can have a record of interpretation, so that by the time I get to her, I have my list of what is going on. So there was the uncapable task, that the credit was lost the moment that the king asked for his dream. The point of them coming was to know what the dream was about for the proper interpretation. My credibility as a biblical counselor will be lost if I went around telling all your business. But here's the thing. I have a task of protecting you and other people at the same time. So if I get a task if I get information that could save your life, I'm going to do what I got to do to save your life. Then we have the wisdom of Daniel. Proverbs 22:6 says that train up a child in the way that he goes, that even when he's old, he will not depart from it. Daniel was raised basically as a Jewish child who's learned everything that he could. And now he's learning the world of the king. Daniel's never forgotten the Lord once, as we have seen. The Lord has always been there for him. The ability to keep calm under severe shock and pressure, to think quickly and to exercise his faith in the moments of crisis. These are aspects of prudence, as what we read in the Word, and discretion that is seen in Daniel. Daniel, again, a wise young man, was able to buy himself time that the other men could not do. Everything that Daniel's done from chapter 1 to where we are today has been wisdom of a youth. When we have wisdom of a child, it's pretty amazing because you see how their brains turn. The wisdom of our daughter is also amazing. I don't know how this little girl can tell you that ginormous means big. There's things that a child can do that adults never think of. So my ending message for you today is have a childlike faith with a childlike wisdom. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we thank you again for your word, for wisdom that is in places that we do not see. We thank you for this time that we get to spend with you.